I'm here to present the award for Ralph Moody. Now, Webster's Dictionary defines hero as one who is greatly regarded for his achievements or qualities. And to me, Ralph Moody fit that description precisely. When I was a mere lad of 5, auto racing resumed in the latter part of 1945 after World War II, and Ralph Moody became one of my first heroes among the group of midget drivers that were just starting their string of popularity that lasted until the turn of the decade when the stock cars started to take the top spot in New England. Now, Ralph attained success in both types of cars, and particularly in the early modified coupes. So it was that I followed his career from Taunton, Mass., through Dania, Florida, and eventually to Mooresville, North Carolina. And this ran from the 40s through the 80s, and he always made me proud. He was a tall, quiet Yankee that started out a mere 20 miles from my Rhode Island border town home. When the midgets arrived in our area in the mid-30s, Ralph took a liking to them, and he soon built his own from various Ford bits and pieces. He started getting rides in, among others, the cars of Nat Whitney, Brad Winters, and the Bouchard brothers, not Ronnie and Ken. They were way, way too young. When the stock cars took over, the Winters number 28 became one of the top cars in the southeastern New England circuit, particularly at Norwood, Mass. And Lonsdale, Rhode Island. Moody was now wintering in Florida, and with the weekly arrival of the Illustrated Speedway News, we felt a bit of pride seeing his name prominently as he was steadily whipping up on the Southerners, especially at Miami's Opelika Speedway. He soon set up permanent residence in the South, and he eventually hooked up with the Ford factory team under Pete DiPaolo and ran the Grand National circuit, teaming up with the Westerner John Holman. And one of the earliest car-building dynasties then began, the Holman and Moody organization. And in those days, you saw H&M on a car and knew that thing was going to go. Besides making a Life magazine photo spread for a rollover sequence on the beach at Daytona, Ralph's best driving year in the big time was 1956. He finished 8th in points in the Grand National circuit, and he had 4 wins and 5 pole positions. After a lone NASCAR win in 1957 and a brief tour with the USAC late models, he then concentrated on the car-building end of things. Holman and Moody always had the top drivers, such as Fred Lorenzen, Dan Gurney, Bobby Allison, Fireball Roberts, Curtis Turner, Joe Weatherly, Marvin Panch, Mario Andretti, and among others. All told, H&M cars captured 92 Grand National wins, and David Pearson won the championship for them in both in 1968 and 1969. Ralph pioneered developments in shock absorbers, weight jackers, tube frames, floater rear ends, and many of his concepts are still being used today in varying degrees. He was called by Circle Track magazine every crew chief's godfather. While preparing this brief speech, we thought back a few of the early tales from the Taunton days that we heard around the tracks, even though I was a very young man, such as his garage behind the Masonic home on Route 44 on the west side of town. Many early stock car racers were always welcome in there, and Ralph would help them out and give them tips. But there was one big exception, though. In the back corner, he had an area that was blocked off by a large canvas. When Ralph went behind here, he was making his special fuel mixture. This was one spot there was absolutely no admittance to. And if you ever see Matt Goff at Seacock, he'll tell you uncertainly how quickly he was physically ejected for trying to enter this restricted area. And then there was one time when the race car was plumb out of engines. So Ralph called up his sister Thelma and asked if he could borrow her 1947 Mercury overnight, which she did, and they took it down to the garage and back on the Masonic home and quickly pulled the engine out, dropped it in the stock car, went up to Norwood, cleaned house, went back in the wee hours of the morning, put the engine back in Thelma's car, and Ralph dropped it over the house and said, "Thank you very much." Ralph Moody is a member of the National Drag Racing Hall of Fame, and he was inducted into the International Motorsports Hall of Fame at Talladega, Alabama in 1994. And now the man who has made me and all New Englanders proud for over 50 years rightfully takes his place in our own Hall of Fame. And I think accepting the award on behalf of Ralph, who couldn't make it up, will be Bugsy Stevens. Thank you.
No speech. Ralph was a friend of mine. He was one of our local heroes as we were growing up, and I'm sure he'll be very happy about this. I wish he was here tonight. Ralph's 83, by the way, and still a crazy driver.